The knock on the apartment door came at 9:17 in the morning. 3 hard, deliberate knocks. The kind of knock that made Mariah Carter put down her coffee cup so fast that some of it spilled on the small kitchen table. The 38-year-old single mother walked slowly to the front door of their tiny one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. She was wearing her old gray housecoat and slippers. She did not have many visitors, especially not at 9:17 on a Sunday. She looked through the small peephole, and then she stepped back so fast she almost fell. Standing in the dim hallway was a tall white man in a perfectly tailored dark navy suit. He was holding a small leather briefcase. Behind him stood 2 other men in suits, plus a woman in a black dress holding a tablet. Mariah did not open the door, she just whispered through it. "Sir, whatever you are selling, we are not interested." The tall man smiled gently. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Richard Whitfield. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Whitfield Industries. I am here because of what your son did yesterday. May I please come in for a few minutes?" Inside the apartment, sitting at the kitchen table eating a small bowl of plain oatmeal, was 11-year-old Jalen Carter. He was the only black boy in his grade who still wore the same pair of sneakers he had worn last year. His mother had stitched the holes in the soles 3 times. He looked up from his oatmeal at the sound of his name. His mother turned and looked at him. Her hands were shaking. "Baby, what did you do yesterday at that diner?" Before this story breaks your heart and rebuilds it again, do me one small favor. If you believe a small act of kindness from a child can move mountains the world has decided cannot be moved, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing. Now let's rewind. Because to understand why a billionaire was knocking on the door of a one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx on a Sunday morning, you have to go back exactly 23 hours. It was a cold Saturday afternoon in November. Jalen Carter walked into Marie's Corner Diner at 10:14 in the morning, carrying a small white envelope in his right hand. Inside the envelope was $47 in crumpled bills. Every single dollar he had saved from the last 6 months of helping his neighbor Mr. Thompson carry groceries up the stairs. $2 per bag, sometimes a dollar tip. Jalen had been saving this money since May for one specific reason. His mother's birthday was the following Tuesday. She was turning 39. And she had not eaten a real meal at a real restaurant in over 4 years. His plan was simple. He was going to order 1 large stack of pancakes with bacon and eggs to take home, plus 1 piece of his mother's favorite chocolate cake. The whole order would cost $26.40. He would put it in the refrigerator. And on Tuesday morning, before his mother left for her early shift at the hospital cafeteria where she worked as a dishwasher, he would surprise her with a real birthday breakfast. Jalen sat at the small counter. The waitress, a kind woman in her late 50s named Linda, smiled at him. "Hey there, Jalen, the usual hot chocolate?" "No, thank you, Miss Linda. Today I am ordering big. It is for my mama's birthday." While Jalen waited, the bell over the front door rang. An elderly white woman walked in slowly. She was wearing an old beige coat that had clearly seen many winters. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun. She was carrying a small worn leather purse. She walked with a slight limp, leaning on a wooden cane. The old woman sat down in the booth across from the counter. She picked up the menu with hands that were thin and shaking. Linda walked over to take her order. "Good morning. What can I get for you, ma'am?" The old woman looked at the menu for a long moment. Then she set it down very carefully. Her voice was very quiet. "Just a cup of hot tea, please, with lemon if you have it." Linda nodded. "Anything else?" The old woman shook her head. "No, thank you, just the tea." But Jalen had been raised by his mama to notice things. And he noticed 3 things in the next 90 seconds. First, her stomach made a small but clear growl. Second, her eyes had stayed on the breakfast menu for almost a full minute, lingering specifically on the section that read, "Hot breakfast plates, $8.95. Third, when Linda set down the cup of hot tea in front of her, the old woman wrapped both her hands around the warm mug like she had not been warm in a very long time. Jalen Carter understood hunger. He had watched his own mother skip dinners for 4 years so that he could eat. Jalen quietly slid off his counter stool. He walked over to Linda. He pulled the small white envelope out of his pocket. He counted out $12.50 in crumpled bills and handed them to Linda. "Miss Linda, could you please get the lady at booth 3 the big breakfast plate? The one with eggs, sausage, hash browns, and toast. And maybe a small glass of orange juice too. But please do not tell her that I paid for it. Tell her it is the special breakfast for senior citizens that the diner gives out on Saturdays." Please, Linda Marshall, who had been a waitress for 32 years, looked at the 11-year-old black boy in worn sneakers in front of her. Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. Linda walked over to the old woman's booth. Ma'am, today is a special senior Saturday at Marie's. Anybody over the age of 70 gets a free hot breakfast plate plus a glass of orange juice. The cook just told me about it this morning. Would you like the eggs, sausage, hash browns, and toast? The old woman looked up at Linda. Her eyes were wide. Are you certain, dear? I am absolutely certain, ma'am. Compliments of Marie's Corner Diner. The old woman started crying very quietly into her cup of tea. Linda brought out the breakfast plate 7 minutes later. The old woman ate slowly. She ate every single bite. When she finished, she carefully wiped her mouth. She left a $1 tip on the table from her small, worn purse. Then she walked slowly to the front door, leaning on her wooden cane. As she walked past Jalen at the counter, she paused for just a moment. She looked at the boy. Their eyes met. The old woman did not say a word, but she nodded at Jalen, a small, slow nod. Then she walked out of Marie's Corner Diner. What Jalen Carter did not know was that the old woman was Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield. She was 78 years old. She was the widow of Harold Whitfield, the founder of Whitfield Industries, a privately held company valued at over $6 billion. So why was a 78-year-old billionaire widow ordering only a cup of tea at a small diner in the Bronx? Because Eleanor Whitfield had been doing the same thing every single Saturday morning for the last 11 years. She had been pretending to be poor. 11 years earlier, Eleanor's husband Harold had passed away from pancreatic cancer at 69. Harold had built Whitfield Industries from a small construction company into a global empire. But Harold had also grown up in a poor neighborhood in Brooklyn. 2 weeks before he died, Harold had asked his wife to make him one specific promise. Eleanor, after I am gone every Saturday morning for the rest of your life, I want you to put on the oldest coat you own. I want you to take a taxi to a different poor neighborhood every weekend. I want you to walk into a small diner. And I want you to sit there and watch how the world treats a hungry old woman who appears to have nothing. And every time somebody shows you kindness, I want you to come home and tell my son Richard their name. Because the people who are kind to a poor old woman they think can do nothing for them are the only people in this world worth knowing. Eleanor Whitfield had been keeping that promise for 11 years. She had made the journey to over 500 different diners across all 5 boroughs. In all that time, only 17 people had shown her real, unprompted kindness. Eleanor kept a small leather notebook in her purse with all 17 of their names. Some of them had received a quiet, anonymous gift. A new car for a young single father, a paid college tuition for a teenage waitress, a small business loan for an older black woman in Harlem. Eleanor and her son Richard had quietly invested over $47 million in those 17 people over 11 years. 11-year-old Jalen Carter had just become the 18th person on the list, but he was about to become something else entirely, because Eleanor Whitfield, in 11 years of doing this, had never once been helped by a child. Especially not a child who was clearly poorer than she was pretending to be. That same Saturday afternoon, Eleanor arrived back at her family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, at 2:47. Her son Richard was waiting for her in the library. Richard Whitfield was 47 years old. He had become the chief executive officer of Whitfield Industries 5 years after his father's death. He sat in the leather armchair across from his mother. He had a small notepad in his lap. How was your morning today, Mama? Tell me everything. Eleanor set down her purse. She took off her coat slowly. Then she sat down across from her son, and she started to cry. Richard, today was different. Today I met a child, an 11-year-old black boy. He was sitting at the counter at Marie's Corner Diner on 138th Street. He had a small white envelope in his hand with what looked like every dollar he had saved for months. The waitress called him Jalen. I ordered only a cup of tea, because I could see the menu, because I noticed his sneakers. They had been stitched at the soles 3 different times, with white thread. He had less money than I was pretending to have. And do you know what that boy did, son? He paid for my breakfast with his own savings. He told the waitress to lie to me, to tell me it was a free senior Saturday meal, so that I could keep my dignity. An 11-year-old child with broken sneakers paid for my breakfast and protected my pride at the same time. Richard Whitfield was completely silent for almost a full minute. Then he picked up his phone and started making calls. By midnight that Saturday, Richard's investigators had compiled a complete profile on Jalen Carter and his mother Mariah. Mariah Carter, 38 years old, single mother. Husband killed in a workplace accident at a construction site 8 years ago. Insurance settlement was denied due to a paperwork technicality. She worked as a dishwasher at the cafeteria of Lincoln Hospital for the last 7 years for $14 an hour. She also worked a second job 3 nights a week cleaning offices. Combined annual income was $31,000. Her son Jalen had been on the school honor roll for 3 years in a row. He had recently won a regional math competition. Rent took 68% of Mariah's monthly income. Richard Whitfield closed the file. He looked at his 80-year-old mother across the breakfast table the next morning. "Mama, tomorrow morning, you and I are going to the Bronx." That brings us back to where this story started. The 3 hard knocks on Mariah Carter's apartment door at 9:17 on Sunday morning. Mariah opened the door slowly. Richard Whitfield stepped forward gently. "Mrs. Carter, my mother and I are not here to ask you for anything. We are here to thank your son. May we please come inside and sit with your family for 10 minutes. Mama brought a chocolate cake from a bakery in Connecticut. She also brought $1,100 in cash, which she would like to give you right now to cover your November rent. May we come in?" Mariah Carter started crying right there in her doorway. She nodded. For the next 45 minutes in the small kitchen of a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, Billionaire Whitfield told Mariah Carter the truth. About the 11-year promise to her late husband Harold. About the 500 diners. About the 17 people on the list. And about the 18th person who was about to become something more than a name in a leather notebook. Mariah held her son's hand the entire time. When Billionaire finished, Richard placed his small leather briefcase on the kitchen table. He opened it. He slid a thick envelope across to Mariah. "Mrs. Carter, my mother and I have spoken with our family foundation board. We are establishing the Jalen Carter Educational and Family Trust effective immediately. The trust contains an initial deposit of $3 million. The funds will be managed by our family attorneys until your son turns 25. The trust will fund private school tuition starting in January. It will fund any university your son chooses to attend. And it will provide your family with a monthly housing and food allowance of $7,000 for the next 14 years. But Richard was not finished. "Mrs. Carter, there is more. You will be quitting both of your jobs as of tomorrow morning. Whitfield Industries is offering you a permanent position as a community outreach coordinator at our New York City office. Your starting salary will be $95,000 a year, plus full benefits. Because what your son did yesterday at Marie's Corner Diner is exactly the kind of community spirit our company has been failing to honor for the last 40 years. And that ends today." Billionaire Whitfield walked over to Mariah, knelt down beside her chair, and took her hand. "Sweetheart, 11 years ago, I made a promise to my husband to find people in this world who would still be kind to a poor old woman who appeared to have nothing. Yesterday morning, your 11-year-old son was the first person on that entire list who was poorer than I was pretending to be, and he gave me everything anyway." Billionaire turned to Jalen. She placed her old wrinkled hand on the boy's small shoulder. "Sweetheart, your father is no longer here on this earth to watch you grow up, so I would like to ask your permission to be a grandmother to you, a real one, for the rest of my days, because I have so much love left in this old heart, and I would like to give it to a young man who reminded me yesterday of why my Harold loved this world so much." Jalen Carter, the 11-year-old boy in worn sneakers, finally spoke. "Yes, ma'am, I would like that very much." Billionaire Whitfield hugged him. The two of them held on to each other for a long time. 3 months later, Jalen Carter started at one of the most prestigious private schools in New York City on a fully funded scholarship. The story of what he did at Marie's Corner Diner was eventually picked up by a small local newspaper, then by a national news network. Marie's Corner Diner became famous overnight. Mariah Carter became the head of the new Whitfield Community Outreach Program in New York. In her first year, the program donated $11 million to small, black-owned businesses, single mothers, and underfunded schools across the 5 boroughs. Billionaire Whitfield, now 79 years old, still goes to a different diner in a poor neighborhood every Saturday morning in her old beige coat. But now she is always accompanied by an 11-year-old black boy in his Sunday clothes, who sits across from her in the booth and who calls her grandma. So here is what I want to leave you with tonight. Billionaire Whitfield spent 11 years searching the diners of New York for kindness. 500 restaurants, 17 names in a small leather notebook. $47 million given quietly to people who were kind to a poor old woman they thought could do nothing for them. And then on a Saturday morning in November, an 11-year-old black boy with $34 left in his pocket reminded a billionaire widow of why her late husband had loved this world so much. The poorest person in that diner gave the wealthiest woman in the room exactly what she had been searching for. And he did it because his mama had raised him right. Think about the Jalen Carters around you right now. The quiet poor children who would give away their last $47 before they would let an old woman go hungry. The single mothers raising boys to be men in a world that has decided their boys do not matter. The world has been wrong about them for generations. If this story moved you tonight, do me one final favor. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story. And drop a comment below telling me about a Jalen in your own life. The quiet child. The one who would give away their last dollar. Because the world is full of poor children whose kindness is about to come back to them in ways they cannot even imagine. And the only question that matters tonight is whether we are paying close enough attention to honor them when their moment finally comes. See you in the next story.